Welcome back. Mike Gaskins is here. He is one of the directors of the El Toro Water District. And today, Mike, we are going to be looking at the water supply systems here in the state.
Correct. We thought it's important that people try to realize where the water comes from. Southern California and El Toro in particular are completely dependent on imported water. And so that has got to be a reliable supply. And you read more and more in the paper. Governor Newsom is in the process of formulating a water resilience plan, but it's still in the formative stages. And so whatever he comes up with will affect the information that we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, as far as that goes, does that mean water resilience having
long-term supplies?
Supplies, yeah.
And being able to withstand shortages, disasters, outages,
okay,
whatever.
So that could be more eventually reservoirs or storage areas?
It's all part of it, yes.
Okay.
And that's what kind of we're going to be going through today, and is with the slides that we have for you.
Okay, all right, very good. So the first one, we're talking about, in general, where does our water come from?
Correct. I mean, typically, water's free. It falls from the sky.
Right.
And it remains free, except that it costs money to deliver it to you.
Right.
Which is the important part. Water sources are groundwater, surface water, and also reclaimed water, saving water things. In El Toro Water District, we are actually buying less water from the Metropolitan Water District than we did in 2013, and we're serving more people.
Okay.
Part of it is because people are conserving. The drought years have carried over into the wetter years, and we are also producing more reclaimed water. And since irrigation's a large portion of the water, that reclaimed water goes into irrigation, which saves us having to buy more water.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned here is desalination. And how do you see, just personally, am I right? Do you have a background in, is it chemistry or?
Marine biology,
okay,
but also chemistry and
I thought
water
I remember
district.
You telling me that. So how do you see that desalination? Do you see something that could eventually grow?
It is growing.
And really be helpful?
Oceanside has a desalination plant, is producing water.
Right.
Very high quality water.
Okay.
A company called Poseidon is trying to build one in Huntington Beach, and they're trying to get commitments from customers to buy water at a pretty much elevated rate before a long time before they ever produce a product, and we don't see the need yet.
Okay.
But the kind of exciting thing more locally is South Coast Water District down Doheny, Laguna Beach, Dana Point area, is going to build a desalination plant there. Okay. And they're going to slant drill out under the ocean and then pull salt water from the sediments there, and then treat it alongside San Juan Creek.
Okay.
And they recently, the federal government signed a pretty much big funding bill for projects, things like that, and included $8.3 million for South Coast Water District to start. So ground is going to break on that. They're going to start building that. We're watching carefully. The issue is that water down there, how do we get it to us? The conveyance was going to be part of it, and that's always part of the whole picture. But desalination is something that's coming. It produces, like I said, very high quality water, but it comes at a price.
Right.
It's expensive.
Yeah, okay. So also along with that is stormwater capture.
And the water that comes down Aliso Creek or Santa Ana River or any of that is for the most part gone. It comes too fast, too hard, but the state is building reservoirs, and there are a lot of people trying to build even bigger reservoirs to capture and store water for the dry years.
Right.
Last year was an exceptionally wet year, like the 5th wettest year on record. And right now we are about 70% of snowpack for this time of year, so we don't know what's going to happen the rest of the year. We had a good start, but it's fallen back. The one thing I'd like to point out real quick, though, when they show the aquifer underneath the ground there, it isn't like there's a big lake down there. The water is all between in the interstitial spaces between rocks and gravel and things like that. So you need the right geology underneath the land to be able to have stored groundwater.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned a reservoir, and I know that it's with a different district, I think Santa Margarita or whatever, but it's the one, they're building a large one off Ortega.
Out of Ortega Highway, they're going to use an old gravel pit.
Yeah.
And that's going to be for storage when it's wet years.
Yeah.
And it's not going to really be anything else. El Toro has a reservoir.
Yes, right.
The R6 reservoir, and that's actually covered with a neoprene cover about, that thick.
Right.
And maintenance on that is coming up to us, and we're kind of going,
Yeah.
But in the next couple of years, we'll have to be doing something with that. But we have probably our own personal resilience plan. We could provide water for, with conservation, 60 days or so on an outage without any more water coming in.
Okay.
But we're trying to get a little better than that.
Yeah.
And not ever get to that. We hope that no disaster happens.
Yeah. So over here, as far as surface water goes, why don't you go through this, because this is interesting as well.
Right. Well, the state, again, Southern California, and most of the population of California is either along the coast or in Southern California per se. The waterfalls in Northern California and in Colorado.
Right.
So we need to convey that water here. The first project was the Colorado River Aqueduct that brought water in. It comes into Southern California. It goes to a filtration plant, as far as we're concerned, in Yorba Linda on top of the hill. But that water, also the Colorado River, belongs to Nevada and Arizona, and so we have to share now.
Yeah, and even Mexico.
And
right?
Mexico's
they get a
getting
share of it?
A small amount.
Okay.
They're not getting probably a full share.
Okay.
Again, Colorado River, historically, steamboats went up from the Sea of Cortez all the way up. Yeah, and a long time passed.
Yeah, yes.
And then the State Water Project came along in the 60s, and that built Oroville Reservoir, which is, again, we have a surface water reservoir. And the water flowed down. It's put into the California Delta, which is one of the slides coming up.
Okay.
And it flows through the Delta from north to south. It's picked up again. It comes in through the California Aqueduct. Again, it's mixed at the Dimer plant in Yorba Linda. And we always receive a blend almost of some percentage of Northern California and Colorado River. Colorado River has no human body contact on it from the time it leaves the river itself.
Okay.
State Water Project water has recreational reservoirs on it.
Okay.
So there's a difference in water quality between the two. Anyway, so it comes in here. The precipitation is roughly 80 trillion gallons per year, and we have 13,000 reservoirs statewide, and only 16 trillion gallons of storage. So that if you look at that percentage, we can survive half a year on just surface water storage. The conveyance system themselves are vulnerable to natural disasters. Earthquakes could be absolutely devastating. And that's probably our biggest concern.
Okay.
The size of the pipe, you can only carry so much water through a given hose.
Right, yeah, that's true. All right, in the next slide, this is the San Joaquin Delta, who, we certainly hear about all the time. It's
a real interesting thing. Historically, the Central Valley of California, all the rivers come out of the Sierra, they blend, and it formed a giant marsh and flowed out through the Golden Gate.
Yeah.
And the lakes have been drained, fields have been produced. The Central Valley of California produces something like 70% of the produce for the entire country.
Yes, yeah.
It's huge. And if you add the Imperial Valley into it, most of the
that's true.
But the Sacramento Delta, because of historically the farmers who farmed that built, you see there's kind of a patchwork, irregular patchwork there in the Delta, and one blue one in there. That's called Frank's Tract, and that's a flooded farm field. The farmers built levees and pumped out these big tracts.
Yeah.
And that's where they farm. but that also itself is a problem. The levees were not built by engineers. They're vulnerable, and the subsidence of the fields in some places is an inch a year now.
Wow.
And there are some places where the fields are 33 feet below the water in the Delta. In the 70s, my family and I did a houseboat trip up through there that was fascinating. But you're going along in this houseboat 30 feet above the fields.
Yeah.
You know, going through all these places.
And I recall, in fact, we probably still have the series, but we haven't shown it in a while. Hugh Hauser did a great water series, was on the Delta, and was talking about that. Now, he did that probably, trying to think when he passed away, it was probably 5 years before he passed away he did that. So it's been quite a while, probably 15 years ago or so. But still, back then, he was walking along the levees of the Delta, and they were talking about then how they're dropping. Yeah.
Yeah, the fields are dropping, and
and here's a good. I mean, you know, this graphic here just shows that.
Right, and the composition of the fields themselves, largely peat, you know, organic material, and that's oxidizing, and that contributes to the subsidence. You can see the hydrostatic pressure in the levees is continually pushing against that, and you know, they try to do repairs as they can. That one flooded tract is because the levee broke.
Yeah.
And it flooded, and now it's a big recreational area.
Yeah. Yes.
But so one of the proposals, and you'll see on the list here, we've got subsidence, earthquakes, flooding. The natural ecosystem is really under threat, and there's environmentalists, there's the water people, and then the farmers who want to protect their income.
Right.
And my understanding is most of the farms in the Delta couldn't survive without subsidies. So they're government subsidies, and they're actually in some cases paid not to grow things.
Right.
But that's a whole nother
issue.
The tunnel project there at the bottom is probably the most controversial, because when they built it, they put the water in the Sacramento River. It flows in from the north and pulls out in the south. Historically, water came from the south and north and flowed out through Golden Gate. So the whole flow through there is now north to south rather than east to west. And in San Francisco area, that's salt water. Up in the bay, or up in the Delta, it's fresh water.
Yeah.
And there's a mixing point in there. And a major disaster like an earthquake with a lot of breaking of levees could cause a surge of salt water up into the Delta.
Okay.
Which would be disastrous.
Yeah.
So.
All right, and the next slide we're going to look at groundwater. And this is something that, you know, when you hear it, you know, when people use the term groundwater,
you see a lake underneath.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, it's in the gravels and things like that.
Yeah.
So you need the right geology underneath it. About a third of the state water supply, but there's a huge amount of water in there. The water that's underground, it could be pumped out, but when you pump it out, the land subsides. Central Valley has subsided substantially with the water being pulled out like that. That's the overdrafting. So one of the government's resilience plan is how do you manage that groundwater? You know, how can we take out enough or replace it in wet years? Is a real dynamic thing. Orange County Water District, the Orange County Water Basin is the worldwide gem. They're so on the forefront of tertiary treating wastewater, because if you drew water out of the aquifer up in Santa Ana or Fountain Valley or any of that, if you think about even the name Fountain Valley, it came because there were so many artesian springs.
Interesting.
In there. There were fountains. You know? But the hydrostatic pressure isn't there anymore. But if you draw down the water, the saltwater intrusion comes in, so they have to pump water in to make a barrier. To prevent salt water from intruding in. And that's a really well-managed aquifer. And the last time I was here, I talked about PFAS and PFOS.
You're right, I remember.
And that contaminates the groundwater basin, which would be a whole nother problem with dealing with groundwater. But Orange County Water District's cutting edge. They're right on the front of it.
Okay. The next slide, water demand. And
this is where it's used.
And 80% is used for agriculture. And it's a give and take thing, because you said, as we know, we are the agricultural capital of the United
country,
States, and
for
in
sure.
many
And
ways
the world.
The
in
world.
places, yeah.
And so it is desperately needed, but along with that, there are different kinds of fertilizers used, and even people think organic fertilizers don't have an effect. Yes,
But they
do.
do. Right.
Yeah.
If you go to
Yes. Yeah. So you got to think about that. But that's part of the give and take, right?
It is. And so 80% is agriculture, about 20% of the water used is human consumption, but 50% of that 20 is just purely irrigation.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a place that reclaimed water comes in and makes, conserves drinking water, the potable water that we would have to buy. And so we're able to, we buy the water, we treat it here at our local plant to a standard that we can be used for irrigation, and we're bringing on different areas here in Laguna Woods.
Right.
Week by week by week, the entire east side, or really the north side of El Toro, that whole section now is on reclaimed water.
Yeah. Do you see a time when, like where I live and the rest of your district may not have that ability to have, or doesn't have reclaimed water in many areas, to the point of where we get to it where somebody goes out and irrigates their lawn, it's going to be from reclaimed water. It'll be a separate system coming in. Now, do you see that happening at least in new developments, new housing developments?
Well, we're retrofitting old developments.
Okay.
Here in the woods. We're doing that on a regular basis.
Yeah. What about the rest of the district,
Other districts are doing it as well. Santa Margarita, your water district, got actually an award at the water conference last year for Lake Mission Viejo, which is now a reservoir, but it's also taking tertiary or highly treated water in it, and it's used for irrigation.
Okay.
This is the reduced snowpack and climate change. I've always loved this picture. This is the webcam for Yosemite.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, there's Half Dome and a giant mound of snow, and there are times that you can't even see Half Dome. So this was March 2011. March 2015. Right. There's no snow. Right now, you look at it right now. There's a little dusting of snow on the top of Half Dome.
Yeah. Now, of course, last year was
really a lot that you couldn't see it because there was a big snow pile in front.
Right. As far as the water supply here, you're solely dependent on imported, because we don't have the
wrong geology underneath us.
Yeah.
We don't have any groundwater that we can pump.
Yeah. So, and that's true of most of South Orange County.
South Orange County, true. There is somebody who believes that there's a usable amount of water underneath in the San Juan Creek area. It hasn't been produced yet. It's not producing. It may or may not be there. Okay. But yeah, but the Santa Ana River Basin and all those gravels, tremendous aquifer. Okay.
All right. Very good. Well, I appreciate you bringing this in because, there's by the way, the purple pipes at the bottom there. Those are the ones that are used for recycled water.
That's how you can tell. The meters and the meter boxes have purple on them, and so we have both potable water supply system and a reclaimed water supply, and never the two shall meet.
Yes. Yeah. Quick question about that before we go away. When you have recycled, is there? I'm not saying people should go up and drink that water, but it is fairly clean.
When it leaves the system and it's been properly disinfected with chlorine and or ozone, it's drinkable. Okay. But it also still has a fair amount of high nitrate, maybe high phosphate, and some of the other nutrients that bacteria and algae would use to grow. And so the tertiary water, when it leaves the plant, is fine, but after it's been in the system for a while, it has potential of growing things. And so I would not recommend drinking it.
Right. But I was curious about that.
If I were dying of thirst, I wouldn't have any issues at all.
Very good. Mike, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. Always good information.
Always. So
I appreciate it.
I hope that our customers continue to appreciate the job we do. And I know that our board of directors is committed to providing the best possible water at a very reasonable price.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good to see you. We'll be back.
Okay.
Yeah, I always wondered,